I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ladies and gentlemen, this episode is dedicated to the memory of the dead and the struggle of the living patriot. Cheers. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the 30th episode of the American Reveille Podcast. I'm your host, James Lane, and you may be wondering why I'm releasing an extra episode this week. Well, folks, today is September 11th, 2020, and with everything going on this year, it can be easy to forget certain promises we all made 19 years ago. I want to put out a disclaimer really quick, because this is not going to be an easy episode or a politically correct episode, and not any of my shows really are, but I want to say this to anyone listening who is on the left, who wasn't alive for it, and maybe thinks that they have an opinion. Shut up. Just shut up and walk away. This episode isn't for you. I'm speaking to the Patriots out there. The people left that still care about this country, about our way of life. I have something to say that everyone needs to hear. But before we get too deep into this, we have to really set the mood. I want to take you back to 2001, and with the way things have been the last few months, I have no doubt that more than a few of you will come with me willingly, though the memory may be bittersweet. I think I still had my beeper at the time, actually, and people forget that not so long ago, a time existed with no iPhones, no Google Maps, no DoorDash, no YouTube. You went out and you figured stuff out. Information was a little bit slower. I mean, MySpace came out in 2003, guys. I seem to remember a time with better food, better music, and better people, really, don't you? But the truth is that people were no different back then than they are now. The big difference today is basically just the speed that all of this endless information moves, combined with a more powerful technology. The people are still the same, and you and I both know that. So, in this episode, I'm going to paint you a picture of 19 years ago and explain to you how 9/11 contributed to what we are seeing right now in this country. The seeds of extremism were planted in mangled metal and blood, fertilized with greed, and are sprouting as thick, thorny, and creeping vines, with the intent of choking out every major city across this great land, attempting to snuff out the last beacon of hope this world has to offer. So, on September 11th, 2001, I was sleeping in the back of my second period class. If I remember correctly, I was in 11th grade, and if I'm going to be honest with you, I really didn't comprehend the significance of the event of 9/11 really until my mid-20s, when my brain matured a little bit more. I mean, we're talking over 5 years of processing what happened to really get a grasp of the events that occurred. So I can only imagine what other conclusions were made by quick-thinking and ill-informed people. I can only imagine what the kids growing up in those homes had to listen to every day. So, in honor and remembrance of every American who gave their life that day and in the wars after, we're going to time travel, and we're going to remember what happened. We're going to talk about it, and we're going to tie it into what's happening right now in our country. We made a promise, ladies and gentlemen, and it's time to stop breaking it. So, what if I told you that I believe Osama bin Laden most likely had zero intentions of striking the U.S. again after 9/11. And if he did, those feelings didn't last very long. What if I told you The strikes on our Twin Towers, the Pentagon, and what would have been another target unintentionally revealed a specific weakness to our enemy. What if I told you it was old guard politicians from both sides of the aisle that unintentionally revealed this weakness? And even further, what if I told you that we may be dealing with a related problem at the moment? Ladies and gentlemen, I say this knowing that evil exists in all men and women, regardless of political affiliation, yet it's how that person chooses to live that defines them. Folks, it was greed that brought this fight to our doorsteps. It's this greed that the radical left think they can fix with socialism, and you'll hear of my thoughts on the matter as we remember the morning of September 11th, 2001. 19 years, and here we are. But where were you? We know where I was, but what about you? Were you at work? Were you at school? Were you in the car or on the bus? Every single person knows where they were and what they were doing that morning. Some folks, 92 of them to be exact, were sitting on American Airlines Flight 11 as they took off from Boston Logan International Airport. The time was 7:59 a.m. and they were headed to Los Angeles, of all places, a very different Los Angeles than Gavin Newstrom's Los Angeles of today. About 15 minutes later, another group of people, 65 of them, take off from the same airport in the same type of airplane. This time, Flight 175, headed to the same destination, which unfortunately means more than one thing in this story. At 8:20 a.m. and 8:41 a.m., another two flights take off. The first, Flight 77, from Dulles International Airport near Washington, D.C., and the second, Flight 93, from Newark International Airport, this one headed to San Francisco. Imagine just sitting there on that plane. By this time, maybe your leg has fallen asleep, you're uncomfortable in the small seating arrangement, you maybe start to doze off, only to wake up to a terrifying hostage situation. So between 8:15 and 8:24 in the morning, the tower and the feds find out that Flight 11 has been hijacked.
Nobody move. Everything will be okay. If you try to make any move, you'll danger yourself and the airplane. Just stay quiet.
At 8:46 a.m., terrified Americans strapped in their seats on a passenger plane turned guided missile hit the North Tower of the World Trade Center between the 93rd and 99th floor. Imagine being strapped to your seat, knowing that you'll never see your loved ones again. Imagine your parents. Imagine your kids, your spouse. Everyone's crying. Everyone's crumbling around you. You close your eyes and you take one long last breath. Scared and alone as 200,000 pounds of aluminum jet fuel flesh intermingle with a steel-framed skyscraper. You and hundreds of other people instantly evaporate, and the fireball literally melts everything in its path. This is where Flight 11's story ends, guys. But for the rest of the world, the story was just beginning. Thousands upon thousands of people begin to gather in disbelief as smoke billows into the sky. At some point, we all asked if it was real. We all wondered if it was possible. It's at this point when the world stood still. Everything seemed to be falling down around us, and the New York police and fire departments, they stepped up and they held this country together. Immediately, within minutes, dozens upon dozens and then hundreds of emergency service members rushed in and began evacuating the North Tower. People are trapped. People are terrified. People are calling their spouses and loved ones and saying goodbye. People are witnessed jumping to their death from the towers. It's something that most of us never saw before. Regardless of if it was in person or on television, and it was on television, it was on every channel. Between 8:59 and 9:02 a.m., rescue personnel are knee-deep into the evacuation of the North Tower and begin flooding into the South Tower to evacuate her as well. Thousands of terrified individuals watch on from outside the building as millions watch on around the world. From inside the South Tower, the evacuation call is heard over the loudspeaker, and people begin rushing to the exits. Something unthinkable happens within minutes of the evacuation call, exactly 1 minute after the call to evacuate. And I want you to think about this. While everyone's running to the exit and cramming the stairways and elevators, out of nowhere, Flight 175 liquefies itself between the 77th and 85th floors of the South Tower to the terrified screams of onlookers and the final momentary cries of the crew and passengers aboard. Hundreds and hundreds of people are instantly killed and or trapped. As the worst day in American history seemed to just keep one-upping itself, just imagine how chaotic it was. You don't even have to imagine. Just remember how chaotic it was. Remember watching people fall to their deaths on live television. Remember the stunned news anchors and the unsettling feeling we all had. What was an invasion next? Are we being attacked? Are we being nuked? What the hell is going on? There was no device full of information to pull out of our pockets. There was no peace for anybody. After the second plane hits, the New York Police Department deploys over 2,000 more officers to the scene to be joined by hundreds of firefighters shortly after. Many of these first responders were up 60, 70, 80 flights of stairs. They went up those stairs by foot, saving countless lives for what seemed like an eternity. So what happens next? We know that word got out about the other hijackings and that at 9:37 a.m., the news cut away from the evacuation of the Twin Towers to the Pentagon, where Flight 77 had just smashed into the side of the building. Everyone on the plane is dead. Over 100 in the Pentagon are dead. We're all freaking out and we're wondering what the hell is happening as key parts of Washington, D.C. are evacuated. No one ever imagined this could happen here. No one had ever seen anything like this before. And by this time, people are receiving phone calls from Flight 93.
Hi, baby. Baby, you have to listen to me carefully. I'm on a plane that's been hijacked. I'm on the plane. I'm calling from the plane. I want to tell you I love you. Please tell my children that I love them very much. And I'm so sorry, babe. I don't know what to say. There's 3 guys. They've hijacked the plane. I'm trying to be calm. We're turned around, and I've heard that there's planes that's been flown into the World Trade Center. I hope to be able to see your face again, baby. I love you. Bye.
A 911 operator, moments later, possibly having just received one of those calls, could have very well looked up at the television at 9:59 a.m. and caught the live collapse of the Southern World Trade Tower. Floor by floor, the structure buckles and implodes upon itself as bystanders scream in horror. Over 800 people die within moments. That's cops, that's firefighters, that's innocent civilians, moms, dads, children. They become part of an ominous dust cloud and a post-traumatic nightmare that plagues thousands of Americans for years to come. A few minutes later, brave American civilians overpower the hijackers on Flight 93 and they sacrifice themselves and down the plane in a field. They die alone. They needlessly die alone for all of us. We find out later the plane was headed towards the Capitol building or even the White House. Still glued to the TV, we cut back to the North World Trade Tower, rescue operations underway, and in an instant, 1,600 lives are extinguished as the tower crumbles in front of every man, woman, and child on American soil, and this country buckles. Every American drops to their knees. There were kids trapped in daycare in these buildings. There were moms and dads trapped in elevators, people rushing down emergency exits, people desperately trying to get home to their families and hold them for one last time, sobbing, hyperventilating, praying, dying. These lives were stolen from us. They were stolen from their children, from their parents, and from their wives and husbands. Altogether, that's 2,606 people that day, 343 firefighters, 60 police officers, 8 paramedics, and countless others. So now it's 19 years later, and we promised we'd never forget. Yet here we are, abandoning our first responders over politics. Here people cower in fear of terrorists. Here people dishonor the memory of our loved ones. So now that we have a more vivid recollection of the day it happened, let's talk about what we saw in the aftermath. We saw crying loved ones. We saw people holding missing family member posters. We saw images of the dead, and we saw survivors covered in dust and disbelief. We saw people with their entire bodies burned, limbs crushed between the rubble, and heard tales of the stench for months. The entire nation, black, white, Latino, Asian, rich, poor, it didn't matter. The entire nation came together as President Bush declared war on terror. Much like the extremists that hijacked what could have been a useful moment in this country a few months ago, politicians did the same thing at some point in 2001. We now know who had what to gain throughout the last 2 decades. In my opinion, folks, bin Laden may have been a lot smarter than we ever gave him credit for. He knew he could never win a physical war with the United States. So what did he do? He built a giant bear trap, and unfortunately for us, the politicians led us right into it. A feigning maneuver, coupled with a long-term pinning strategy, kept all eyes on war and infiltration while government control and surveillance skyrocketed. Americans came together, though, in a way that hadn't been seen in decades, and brotherly love was at an all-time high, though a different reality was playing out overseas. We went to war. A war voted for, mind you, by people like Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton, the same people pretending to be the good guys right now. So we went to war for the Americans who died on September 11th, and we haven't stopped since. We found no weapons of mass destruction, and American patriots lost their lives, with even more of them living with the scars of these events and what they experienced to this very day. Famous battles took place, and brave military men and women received medals, while simultaneously others received folded flags and emptiness, sorrow, heartbreak. We know the truth about the wars and the pockets they filled. We know about the good and humble work our men and women in uniform worked their asses off to do, and we know about how our government betrayed them time and time again. Remember, Joe Biden lied about Benghazi a month after it happened. So, ladies and gentlemen, I have some simple questions to ask you, and I want you to ask them to yourself. How is it that Donald Trump was able to defeat ISIS so quickly? How was it that Trump can bring so many of our service members home and de-escalate the conflicts in the Middle East to the point that Arab and Israeli peace is now a reality? I don't know if you heard it on the mainstream media, folks, but did you even know that Donald Trump was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize? We have Middle Eastern conflict going back well before the 1970s, so why is it that Trump can all of a sudden get these countries to start coming together and make peace with each other? The answer is actually very straightforward. It's because Trump doesn't have a financial interest in the Middle East oil trade. You know who does seem to have a financial interest in the Middle Eastern oil trade? Every president since 9/11 and before Trump. There's also a bunch of politicians in this pile from both sides of the aisle, but that's an entire show of its own. So bin Laden knew that by sucker punching the United States, he could drag us into a never-ending war. We are a free country with a media that broadcasts everything, with loose-lipped politicians bragging all over the world, and with a government dictated by people. Why would you want to drag us into a never-ending war, you ask? Great question. Studying our history, bin Laden knew that if America fought long enough in an overseas war, the people of the United States would become sympathetic to their cause because they become sick of war. This doesn't sound crazy anymore, does it? Not in the age of social justice warriors and left-wing extremists. Ask yourself, how long did it take before it became a violation of political correctness to say anything negative whatsoever about the Middle East and terrorism? How long until it started to seem like all of our institutions were becoming infected with some sort of hypnotic toxin? Within a few short years, our institutions, our cultures, and our children were condemning all of us based on racist ideology. Political correctness seemed to sweep in overnight like a plague of Egypt, taking many a firstborn, indoctrinated into their own ranks. Folks, this is the pinning maneuver they didn't want us to see, so they just fed it to us in small doses so we wouldn't notice the infiltration. Counting on the greed of politicians and based upon the history of the United States and its people, bin Laden laid a trap. And the United States fell into it head first. With the diversionary attack on 9/11 and the pinning in place of our forces via endless war, the terrorists were free to influence the hearts and minds of the American people on brand new, never before seen miracle inventions like social media and the iPhone. The people at the top didn't notice because they're too busy getting richer and more out of touch with reality. Obama made people feel like we were more together than ever. But when you look at the facts and when you look at the numbers, we were more apart than ever before. In fact, every year after the wars began, this country grew more divided. Don't deny it, and we know it's true. We felt it. We saw it with our own eyes. So, what happened to ISIS? We don't hear about them anymore because Trump killed them all. I'm serious. The entire thing. There's no more ISIS. It's functionally dead. Trump even dropped a missile on Soleimani's forehead at the Baghdad airport. Why couldn't we do this before? It's not our military's fault, as it's the leadership that was shackling our men and women at the wrists and ankles. They were fighting multiple wars for decades on a choke chain, so why are we still overseas, you ask? Those questions are for Bush and Obama. Trump's bringing everyone home, another 40% in fact by the end of this month. So as Trump began pounding the terrorists from the beginning of his presidency in 2016, they began to lose grasp on this strategy as the caliphate leadership began to die off quicker than they could be replaced. We have at this point 15 or 16 years of endless war and lousy crony capitalism mixed with garbage politics, further driving the middle class towards extinction and tightening the chokehold around American families. Trump then wins the election in 2016 and the Democrat Party begins to crack. Time goes by and the terrorists lose grip on the war of influence. A power vacuum forms. This power vacuum is seized by the radical left. This power vacuum is filled by extremist groups like Antifa and Black Lives Matter. The Democrats endorse this leftist extremism. They consent and approve with their deafening silence. Americans across the country, sick of war, sick of violence, sick of hate, sick of the very environment Democrats have created for them. Americans who never forgot, and those who are being suddenly reminded are having a lie shoved down their throats. We all are. You have to understand that the politicians that voted for these wars are supported by wars. They need war. They can't live without war. So much so that they would sell out their own country, their own citizens for the power and money that's at stake. Ladies and gentlemen, if we let the American dream die, what future is left for our children? For our grandchildren? if we forget what it is to be an American, to possess that fighting spirit, that pioneer spirit, that cowboy spirit, that American spirit, that grit that makes you the greatest innovators, the greatest creators, and ass kickers on the face of this earth, if we go the way of socialism, then all is lost. So, to bring the show home, ladies and gentlemen, we're now fighting another war on terror. But instead of Middle Eastern extremists, we're fighting socialist extremists who have embedded themselves deeply into our institutions right under our noses. The Democrat Party is coming full circle and attempting to return our country to a form of segregation and slavery, the likes of which no free country has ever seen. They think so little of your will to do something about it, to be something better, to be a patriot. They have so little respect for you that they literally are doing it right in front of your eyes. On September 11th, 2001, Islamic terrorists hijacked multiple passenger airliners and killed thousands of innocent Americans. The American people are the ones who paid the price that day, and ever since, as the politicians and tech companies took this country for a 15-year joyride, like drinking teenagers on prom night, there's been no accountability. As time moved forward, this country started to bleed internally, and like the callous vultures that they are, the radical left, along with groups like Black Lives Matter and Antifa, decided that it was time to enact their version of a 21st century final solution. Ladies and gentlemen, ashes are falling on the faces of dead police officers' children today. Think about how it must feel to be a cop right now, or a firefighter, or an EMT, or a paramedic. People are murdering people now. People are targeting police officers. People are murdering police officers. People are throwing Molotov cocktails now, and people are chanting "Death to America" in American cities. In New York, in California, it's 9/11, folks. 19 years later. And bin Laden doesn't have to come back from the dead to chant "Death to America." Young Americans are doing it for him, and the left's applauding it, and we're watching it happen. Whether you think I'm wrong or right, you have to admit that Americans chanting "Death to America" in our own cities is not right. No one on the left is condemning these groups. No one on the left is condemning the people chanting "Death to America," yet at the same time, anyone with their own thoughts is censored across every single social media platform. The "Death to America" folks, though, they have their rights protected. So ask yourself, why aren't my rights being protected? We have congresswomen that are celebrated anti-Semites and hand-to-God socialists, and we have a mainstream media that has lost control of their grasp on reality. People are sick and tired of being toyed with. People are sick and tired of being lied to, and people are sick and tired of being told how to live in the United States. So to conclude, this country will not be restrained, and its people will not be held prisoner. Today, September 11th, 2020, 19 years after the pain, the heartbreak, and the twisted metal, the rest of us wake up and denounce the actions of the Democrat Party. We declare in one voice that we reject Marxist ideologies, we reject cancel culture, and we reject the left's cruel and racist practices against human life. It's time to honor the dead and put a stop to endless wars, regardless of how good they are for business. It's time to shut down the socialists wherever we see them. I'm not telling you to be violent. I'm telling you to reject their ideology. I'm telling you to vote every single damn Democrat out of office this November. When they preach, walk away. When they call you out verbally, give them a taste of their own medicine. On social media, when they attack, stand your ground. And on November 3rd, the entire country goes red and re-elects Donald J. Trump. And if and when the mobs come, you stand tall, shoulder to shoulder with the police if you must, and you reject the manufactured insanity. Together, we will cut out the rot and rebuild the foundations of this country from the inside out. We will thoroughly audit and rebuild our education system, and we will bring real equality back to our culture. It's time to remember what it is to be an American. It's time to remember who you are and the heritage you inherited and earned. The leftist terrorists want a socialist utopia. We'll crush them with our capitalist utopia. They want to control our liberty and censor our voices. We'll chop up big tech and destroy Antifa and Black Lives Matter through legal means. They want to try and defund the police. We'll defund Planned Parenthood once and for all. America's back, and there ain't a damn thing they can do about it. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for having this conversation with me today, and I really appreciate your time. If this message resonates with you, then all I ask from you is to spread the word and follow along. You can email me directly at jameslane@AmericanReveille.com. That's American Romeo, Echo, Victor, Echo, India, Lima, Echo.com. Have a fantastic weekend, and I'll talk to you Monday during episode 31. Cheers, folks.